Hello, my name is Trevor Jennings. I'm here with my father, Tom Jennings, and you are watching Heavy Rotations. This is a show where we basically just trade vinyl and talk about it. Ask each other, where they got the vinyl, what their thoughts are on this vinyl, what it means to them, and then the other person listens to it and gives their thoughts on it, just because we have very different tastes. And so this week, my father gave to me a record with his name in it, Richard Thompson.
That's
right. It's got an
and
interesting
you
cover.
are Tom's son, right?
I am
son.
Tom. Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Very nice.
Wow. So this is why you gave it to me.
I actually forgot why I gave it to you. Oh wait, it's Amnesia. That's why I
okay.
forgot. Sorry.
Fine.
See what I did there?
Very good. So why don't you tell us about the record, starting with when did you pick up this album and why?
Okay, so Richard Thompson is actually an English guitarist. I was introduced to him by a former roommate by the name of John Kelly. And I've always admired John. John is an incredibly talented musician in his own right. And, when I was younger, I really looked up to him. I still look up to him, obviously. But his taste in music was impeccable, one might say. And he went to this record store in Rochester called the Bop Shop. And the owner of the Bop Shop is a guy named Tom Cohn. So if he ever gets a chance to see this, and Tom, I guess, was a big fan of Richard Thompson, he introduced John Kelly. John Kelly, and I used to kind of sit around and smoke cigarettes, drink beer, and listen to records. So, and it was cool because there was a lot of records that I came to love was during that period of time when John and I were hanging out. And this wasn't one of the Richard Thompson albums that we listened to. We definitely listened to some of the earlier material. He actually recorded with his wife for a little while. They had a kind of a nasty breakup that resulted in an amazing album. Richard and Linda Thompson. Oh my gosh, yeah. And there's a part of me that kind of regrets not giving you that one first because it's just her voice is amazing and his voice as well. But it's funny. John had a great way of always summing up like what a particular artist sounded like before we heard him. And or her, whichever. And he says Richard Thompson. He's like, oh my gosh, this guy's guitar playing sounds like Mark Knopfler. Mark Knopfler was guitarist in Dire Straits. Dire Straits was more popular than Richard Thompson. Richard Thompson was actually around before him, and he was with a group called Fairport Convention, which is one of the early popular folk bands out of England. And part of my reason for giving it to you is because I know that you suddenly began to have kind of a love of this Americana, outlaw country, things like that. And he has kind of this Celtic feel to him. Maybe, even though he's English, he's definitely, when you hear him sing, you can tell he's English.
What?
But just sort of he's got that folky influence. And, of course, you're more than significant other, as I like to call her, Meredith, is really into John Prine, and John Prine is a folk guy too. So I thought this was an album that you could enjoy together, which of course you played when she wasn't around, but that's okay too,
Yeah, I mean, I definitely get the folk vibe. I feel like it's like a folk rock album or like a Celtic rock album. His voice kind of strikes you at first. You're just like, whoa, this like really stands out. I've never heard anyone sing like that, and he's got like a very I don't know. It's like it almost starts off like I thought it was gonna be like a cheesy classic rock album, but then it came. Then I was like, oh, this has kind of got some like Americana. Like there's a lot of influences here that I couldn't put a pin on. Like I don't know if I could really put a genre label on this.
Right.
And like when you gave it to me and I saw the cover and everything, I was just like, I don't know if I'm gonna like this record. Even when I first put it on, I was like, this is different. But I actually ended up growing to love it. But So also, have you seen them live, and what do you think about them live versus studio?
Well, Richard Thompson, I wish he toured a lot more. I was working at a place called Red Creek in Rochester, New York, and this was actually, I think at this point John had already moved on. He was out of the area or whatever, but I still used to listen to a lot of Richard Thompson, and when they told me that he was coming, I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. And he did a solo acoustic show. And I got a chance to meet him. We had a cappuccino machine, which at the time was kind of a big deal. Now it's like not like you go to Starbucks, you go to Tim Hortons, whatever, and you get cappuccino. But back in those days, there were very few places that had real cappuccino. And as soon as Richard Thompson found out we had real cappuccino, he was all excited. I was the best cappuccino maker. So he, the owner brings him up to me. He's like, "Oh, Richard Thompson really loves cappuccino, and I told him you're the best cappuccino maker we have." And I was like, "Oh my God!" So I made it for him, and he was just like, dude, he was so cool. I was like, man, we talked about his music, and I talked about how much I loved it. We talked afterwards as well, and just it was like, I don't know, man, one of my most treasured experiences as far as meeting an artist. He was just so humble, and as far as a live performer, I mean, the stuff this guy does on a guitar. I mean, I know you're a drummer, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't appreciate like a great guitarist, but I guess the only way I could put it is that, like you as a drummer, when you listen to somebody like Keith Moon, you're like, holy crap,
Right.
This stuff's incredible. I mean, this guy's innovative. He's brilliant, Richard Thompson's in that category. Anybody that even plays guitar as a hobbyist like myself, you hear it and you go, my God, man, this guy just does stuff that's off the charts, like a Hendrix or an Eddie Van Halen, but not in their style, but like he's one of those guys that when you hear him play, you're like, oh my God, that's Richard Thompson. I think the cool thing about Richard Thompson too is that he's one of those special artists that's really been able to capture his unique guitar sound on record. And this is a later career release, but even in his earlier albums, I mean, you hear Richard Thompson's guitar, it's like, dang, that stuff's amazing. And I, like you, the first time I heard Richard Thompson, I was kind of like taken aback by his voice. I'm like, man, this voice is, like you try to pinpoint it, like, what does this guy sound like? He's not like a nasally Tom Petty, Bob Dylan, but he's certainly not like a smooth, he's not like a Roger Daltrey or a, Paul McCartney. It's like, who is this guy?
Well, I also opened it up, which is why I also couldn't figure out what this music was going to be, because I opened it up and he's playing a chainsaw.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, what is this? Like, what did you give me? Like, it's just like, the front cover, the back cover, and then I opened this up and I was like, all right, I have no clue what I'm in for.
Yeah, so I suppose it was kind of a pleasant surprise because I literally gave you no background on this record whatsoever.
Right.
But yeah, you see a guy playing a chainsaw on the inner sleeve and nothing good's going to happen out of that, right?
Yeah, I was like, is this some like heavy metal thing? Yeah. Like, but the front art doesn't suggest that. I was just like, you can't put a pin on it.
Yeah.
Which, like, what genre would you say that this actually is? Like, if you had to assign a genre to, or you were gonna, put it in a record bin somewhere, where do you think you would find this, or where would you put this?
I mean, back in the day, I guess he'd be found like in the rock bins with pretty much everybody else. He's certainly not a rock performer, and he started out as a folk guy. I mean, I don't know, folk rock. I don't know. I don't know. Celtic rock. I mean, it's not Celtic rock. I think Celtic rock. I think like Flogging Molly or Dropkick Murphys.
But like I think it was the last two songs, like how the album ended, it was very Celtic. Like I was just like, wow. It started out kind of heavy, or not even really heavy, but a little more rockin'.
Right.
And then it ended very kind of mellow, and I was like, wow, it's like he brought in this whole Celtic feel to this album, and then kind of started to realize the whole album kind of had that feeling to it. It was wild.
Well, I think what's unique about Richard Thompson is that he's sort of able to capture that, I don't know what, it's not really a proper term for it, but like porch playing, where you just get a bunch of guys together on a sunny day. You got a guitarist, got a few other instrumentalists, and you just are sitting on the porch and, there's... Picking. Yeah, they're picking. And you got guys that are just making beautiful music. I mean, he is kind of a high-end picker, obviously, because he's great. But that's what makes his songs kind of catchy and sort of fun. But I think maybe, a guy like Richard Thompson, that would have been one of his strengths and his weaknesses during his career. Like, Richard Thompson's the kind of guy you've either heard of him or you got no clue who he is. And that's because you can't, pigeonhole him into a particular genre. He doesn't necessarily fit on a particular radio station, whatever. But if a guy like John Kelly gives you a Richard Thompson album, you're like, oh, this is really cool. And you're able to build a loyal yet smaller following. But I think with somebody like Richard Thompson, because they have the loyal and smaller following, they wind up having a longer career than a guy that, starts out, great first album, and then they just have to live off that. And, I don't want to pick on, Alanis Morissette per se, but I think she's an example of a musician who had a great early recording. I think it was their third album. And she's never really equaled that success. So at one point, she's this huge superstar, and now she's kind of like sort of playing Jagged Little Pill for the rest of her career, and that's what she's got. Whereas Richard Thompson at least has enough of an audience where he can still continue to produce original music and build a fan base.
How many records of his do you own then? Is that like most fans kind of owning a ton of his records?
I would think so. I mean, I don't know off the top of my head how many he put out, but like I think I have like 6 or 7.
Wow.
Between just him and his wife.
Wow.
Yeah. The Shoot Out the Lights album, Richard and Linda Thompson, to me is probably one of the top 10 best albums I've ever heard in my life, to be honest with you. I wouldn't even consider this, of all his albums that I own, this is my least favorite, but I still love it.
But yeah, this is the one that apes me.
Well, I think it almost makes sense more for, in some ways it's better to be introduced to an album at the lower end, and then when you get to the better stuff, you're like, holy crap. Whereas if you give somebody the best album, then everything else you listen to afterwards is like subpar. I mean, you start listening to the Beatles at Sgt. Pepper, She Loves You is okay, but it's still, you set the bar at the best album. It just doesn't make sense to seek out the rest of the collection. So that's kind of why I didn't give you my top favorites, because this is a great album.
It's a starter album. Like,
it's a starter album.
You'll kind of start diving deeper into it.
If you like this, man, it's like you're really gonna like this, or you're really gonna like this. I mean, if there's even any element of that, And I think that's in some ways a better approach. The artists that I grew up loving, I never started with their best album. I always started with third or fourth best album, and then, and you'd find an album, it's like, oh man, this isn't quite as good as that one I own. But then you find another one, you're like, holy crap, this is great. And then eventually you get to that one album that's their best, and that still may not want to be in your favorite. You're always going to have when it comes to an artist, you're going to have your sentimental favorite, which Across the Crowded Room is my sentimental favorite from Richard Thompson, because it came out at a time when I was really listening to him. And but I think Shoot Out the Lights with Richard and Linda Thompson from that earlier era is his best work.
Well, cool.
You're like, I have no more questions, Dad.
Well, I mean, you summed it all up. I mean, that's awesome.
So I guess, we got to ask, as far as you said, you didn't like the cover art.
I mean, I liked it. It just, struck me. I didn't know what I was getting myself into.
Yeah, I don't know what to think of the cover art. It's not necessarily representative of the artist. It's one of his later major label albums. What about the track sequencing? You said that
I thought it was beautifully sequenced. Like, I loved how the A side and the B side were very different from each other. And I thought it was a good introduction. Like, the A side was a little bit rockier. I want to say harder, but it's only harder in comparison to the B side, which got a little more kind of lax and a little more folky, and then the last 2 songs kind of ended on a very relaxing note.
All right, well, listen, every episode we got to ask the final question, which is, of course, is this an album that you would consider owning for your collection?
I'm not sure. I don't think so off the first couple listens, but I think I would dive into his collection maybe online and then kind of see if I end up falling in love with him or not. But currently, no. I don't.
So you think it's it's intriguing enough, like you said. Maybe it's you'd explore his catalog more.
I don't completely diss it, and I'm just like, oh, I hate this record. I would never listen to it again. But I don't think I liked it enough where I'd be like, yeah, I'm gonna pick this up and take it home and put it in my collection. But I would go and listen to him otherwise, and maybe later I'd be like, oh, actually, I never really liked Richard Thompson. Now I'll pick this up.
Okay, well, that's fair. I mean, I can always disown you as a son as well for your not wanting to own this Richard Thompson album. But I'll just take it back then. The heck with you, young man. But, this was a great episode as always, and we do appreciate you tuning in. Hopefully you're enjoying these episodes of Heavy Rotation. Remember to subscribe, share with your friends. We'll see you next week.
We'll try.
Thanks.